Welcome back. Is local print media an endangered species? For this week's 802 News podcast, Mark Johnson speaks with Colin Flanders from our media partner 7 Days about the struggle many small town outlets are facing. Let's take a listen.
Newspapers are constantly trying to figure out ways, how do we engage people? How do we make sure that we're a part of their life and have to be? Whereas 40 years ago, you could count on the newspaper every day showing you what you need. Nowadays, there are so many different ways to learn about what's going on. And that's really hard for a business that relies on those eyeballs. Those eyeballs are in many ways translated directly to dollars.
Mark Johnson joins us now. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me, what forces or events does 7 Days report attribute the hardships of these newspapers to?
I think the big one is just the advent of social media. There's so many different things competing for our attention in terms of news distribution, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook. I think that was number one, and then I think this really, the two of the 1-2 punch was the pandemic. So many people stopped advertising, and that just cut out the base of local newspapers in particular. I think also, print and broadcast suffered too, but not quite to the extent that print did.
So a number of Vermont's local print media outlets are holding strong despite all of these pressures and the changing landscape. Why do you think there's a difference specifically here in Vermont as opposed to nationally?
I'm not so sure there is. Nationally, there's 2 newspapers a week that are going out of business. I think a lot of people felt that Vermont was doing better. We've got 7 Days, we've got Vermont Digger, we've got a number of weeklies, but they're all really struggling. And I think it's only been somewhat recently that they've been willing to acknowledge that in the hopes that maybe people will show their support. There's also just been this huge shift in where they get their money from. Instead of advertising being the primary source and also subscriptions, now there's this big move towards having philanthropy really fill in that gap. And that's a to be seen whether or not that's going to be successful.
So you've been in business a long time, you've seen it all. What do you see as the future of local print media?
Well, I'm concerned. I think like a lot of people are, and I think, online may be where this is all going. The idea of newspapers like 7 Days printing an actual print publication seems to be a little bit of an anachronism. I know a lot of people, me included, you really like to hold a newspaper, and there's something about that. But I just don't know how realistic that is. And whether or not some of these national organizations that are coming up with huge amounts of money for philanthropy, how much of that will come to Vermont, again, remains to be seen. But I think this shift is really the only hope. It's just not going to come back in terms of revenue.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. And you can listen to the new episode of the 802 News podcast on our website or wherever you get your podcasts. Mark Johnson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.